NowBoarding, the official boarding area podcast, would like to welcome aboard all listeners. This nonstop service includes interviews, reviews, and insights from our talented crew of bloggers. Episode number 12 is NowBoarding.
Joining Captain Ed Pizza in the cockpit on today's episode is John Nickel D'Andrea of No Mass Coach. Make sure those tray tables are stowed, your seats are in the upright position. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the episode.
Welcome back to another episode of the NowBoarding podcast. Thanks again for tuning in, where we meet boarding area personalities so you can learn more about how they like to travel and how they can help you. You know, two things that you can do for us to help us with the show are to subscribe to the podcast and leave us a rating. Subscribing is easy. There's a little button right in whatever platform you're listening to, whether that's Apple Podcasts or Stitcher or Google Podcasts. And leaving a rating is where you click and give us 1 or 5 stars and leave a comment. Those comments are things that we use for feedback to help make the show better. But also by subscribing and rating the podcast, you help us grow the audience, and that's obviously really important to us. So up this week is one of the co-authors of the blog No Mas Coach. I've got, and I'm going to do a horrible job pronouncing his name. He did a much better job before we jumped on. But John Nickel D'Andrea, and
wow.
What'd you give that on a scale of 1 to 10? 2, 3?
10. That was really good.
Wow, you should do it yourself though. You give it a try.
Nickel D'Andrea.
Yeah, okay. His was better than mine. So John and his partner Ben blog at No Mas Coach, and we'll have a direct link to it in the show notes. But we're going to do John and Ben separately so we can have different points of view on how they see things, even though they do think a bit alike from a travel standpoint. Just thought it'd be fun to make sure that we had both of them on separately to express their views. The first time I can remember sitting down with them was at an FTU a year or two ago, where they presented together. And so I've seen them together and apart, and now I get to sit with John for 30 minutes and learn some new things about him. How you doing today, John?
Wonderful. Thanks, Ed. How are you?
I am wonderful, too. I am home, which is always the best place for me to be, even though I do love traveling. I love to be with the family.
Absolutely, man. It's as much as we travel, there is something nice about coming back to your own bed and raiding your own refrigerator and going to what you know is comfortable. But it sure is nice to get out every now and again.
I agree. There's so much business travel that for me, it's, I do look forward to the family travel, very much so. And, like, for example, we were lucky enough to score some tickets to Australia. So we're taking the kids to Australia next summer, and I'm certainly looking forward to that. But, hopping on the next flight to Des Moines, Iowa is not necessarily something that gets me jumping out of bed in the morning.
Well, it's a rough life. Oh, we're going to Australia in a few short months. Yeah. So it's rough life.
Yes, it very is. So tell me how you got interested in travel. How did you dive into the crazy game that we play?
I started traveling when I was 10. My mom got me set up on one of those, I think it was called Earth Shuttle. It was one of those things like when you're in 8th grade, they send you off to, these new adventures. I went to New York and Niagara Falls. I was living in Michigan at the time. And it was cool. It was like, you're 10 years old and you're going to the airport and you're flying somewhere and your parents aren't with you and it's just you and your friends. And I remember that I remember that vividly. My first
Earth Shuttle. I'd never heard of this.
I'm guessing they went out of business. I don't know. We're talking many, many moons ago.
But so Earth Shuttle was the name of the airline, or were they like a charter organization?
No, that was like,
trip?
No, that was just like the company. You pay them $1,000 and they take care of everything. It's one of the middle school travel exchange things.
Yeah.
But that is when I signed up for my very first U.S. Airways dividend miles number, and I still have to this day. I still have the old U.S. Airways card they gave me from when I was 10 years old. It's nostalgia, I suppose. But I will say that when my first big international trip that I remember was when I went in 2003 to Madrid. And back when you're still developing film, that was on my own. I did a study abroad in 2000 when I went to Peru. I studied abroad and spent 7 weeks there and got to travel around the country. And so between that and 2000 and this big individual trip in 2003, it was like, wow, these are really cool places. I got to get out and see more of it. I wasn't able to because I was broken in college, but and I didn't know any better at the time about the world of miles and points. But it definitely gave me the bug. Let's call it that.
Yeah, it's amazing the things I didn't know. With my first handful of trips, I assume all those trips that you took were in coach, the long haul stuff.
Unfortunately, Yeah.
Did you know? It's funny. I had this interesting conversation with somebody else that we were recording with. It was actually Charlie from Running with Miles, and he said, back when he took his first trip, he didn't even really know that something better than what he was sitting in existed. He just knew he was going someplace cool.
Yeah, I think that's it. I mean, especially if, well, when you walk into the airplane, you don't turn left if you're boarding in the middle, right? So you don't even know it's there. And I think that a lot of times when we talk to people who read our blog or who we meet in person, it's well, I found this great deal for $300, or I found this great deal for $500. They don't even think to look to see if there's something available in business class, or they don't even know that it's there because maybe they assume that it's thousands of dollars. It's out of their reach, or they can't afford it. They can't do it. So it's just not even on their radar. It definitely wasn't on mine.
No, I think it's a really good point, and not one that I think of often. Certainly, I know it intuitively, but there's so many people out there who just don't even bother to look for a cheap premium economy or business class fare because they think they're not going to be able to afford it, so they just miss.
Exactly right.
Yeah. So, how long have you been blogging? I don't actually know the answer to this.
We started back in 2014. It was kind of just was a way for us to tell our friends and family what we were doing. Right. It was, I got tired of constantly posting on Facebook the photos, and I didn't want to be like that guy that, you get all your family together and it's like a slideshow with Uncle Morty, like, here I am in front of this and here I am in front of that. It was just, I wanted something unique and use our voice. And the more we traveled, the more we met interesting people. It seemed like a really cool way for us to share our experiences. And then it became into this, how can I put, maybe like this, it was like teaching, right? People are like, well, I want to do that. How did you do that? Well, I want to earn those miles. How did you do that? I've always loved teaching and sort of showing others to how to do what we do. And it's morphed naturally into this, well, we were just sharing our trip reports to here's how we do what we do. And it kind of took off.
Yeah, I think that's a natural progression for a lot of the folks that I know that are bloggers who have like helped people using a significantly less efficient means of communication. For me, it was email. I used to email, friends and family tips about, cheap fares and stuff like that. And I was like, gosh, I'm sending out the same email to a bunch of different people. And somebody's like, well, why don't you start a blog? And of course, my answer was, well, what the heck is a blog?
How do you do that?
Right. What's that thing? Of course, for me, that was 2008. So significantly less tech back then. I'm not sure if the iPhone was out yet.
Back in the day when
we had Blackberries and not iPhones, like you young whippersnappers.
What's a Blackberry? I think I have a bush of that next to my blueberries in my garden. Yeah.
Boy, I terribly miss my Blackberry. I could type the Magna card on my Blackberry keyboard 70 words a minute without even looking at the screen. So when you are blogging, what sort of areas do you like to focus on?
The premise of what we do is, well, I mean, it's in the name, No Mas Coach. We both work 9 to 5 jobs, or I guess I should say 7 to 3. We start pretty early. But if you've got 2 weeks of vacation a year, think of it this way, right? The average American gets 2 weeks vacation a year and they don't use half of it. Right? They use 1 week a year because they either feel that they can't be bothered with it, they can't afford the trip, or they're way too valuable for their company and they're going to lose their job. Yeah. So if you let's assume that you take 2 weeks a year, you want those 2 weeks to be something that you remember, right? Yeah. Nobody ever remembers the coach flight that they took from Toronto to Paris, unless it was absolutely miserable. And chances are it was. But I can tell you, if you fly from Toronto to Paris and you had a phenomenal experience where you reclined your seat into a bed and you were served on bone china and you were given champagne and you got to the airport and you got a manicure and a massage and it's all included because it was free because you were flying in first class or business class, you're going to remember that. And it's going to start you out from the beginning. So we made a vow back in 2013 to never fly coach again. And it's been very interesting. We started in 2014, 2015, and 2016 of just simply, we're not going to fly coach. Hell or high water, we're not going to fly coach. And then we decided that we would start buying a coach ticket every now and again, just so we could remind ourselves how horrible it was. And so it would be a reminder of us that why we're doing what we're doing. We flew WOW Air to Iceland, and I couldn't fit in the seats because I was too big. I was too tall. My knees wouldn't fit in the seats. We flew on an ANA to Manila, a back-end coach where the seat broke, the video screen didn't function, there was no air conditioning. So we've put ourselves through the paces just to remind ourselves that when we do get on that first class flight on Emirates to go to Dubai and we're served caviar and champagne, that there's a reason we do the crazy things that we do to earn miles and points. We want our experience to not just be about the flight, but also about the hotels. Luxury hotels, 5-star hotels are incredibly attainable. A lot of times the Fairfield Inn in Sandusky, Ohio is exactly the same price as the Luxury Collection in downtown Athens. So why would you spend so much money in Sandusky, Ohio, when you could spend less in Athens, Greece at a Luxury Collection hotel? So it really for us is, how can we afford with time and money to take these luxury vacations and do it for less than you would spend on a coach ticket?
Yep, couldn't agree more. And I want to get into a little bit deeper on strategy of how you guys do that. We're going to step aside real quick for our first break. We'll be right back with John on the NowBoarding podcast. The NowBoarding podcast is brought to you in part by Norwegian Air. Norwegian is one of the fastest growing airlines in the world. The low-cost carrier is based in Europe and continues to connect cities that have never been connected before. Their most recent flights include nonstop service from Florida to Rome, Madrid, and Stockholm. They've also launched new service from Montreal to the Caribbean and from the Toronto area to Dublin. With a fleet of brand new 787 and 737 MAX airplanes, they're making the world affordable for thousands of travelers. Welcome back to the NowBoarding podcast, and I'm going to see if I can get another 10 out of 10 from John on his name. NOMAS coach John Nicol D'Andrea is back with us. Where were we
10
at?
out of 10.
That's
great.
8.5?
You're doing wonderful.
I don't know.
You're doing fine.
I felt like that was a little weak. All right. Well, okay.
All right, I'll give you a 9. You have one more chance to get better.
that darn Russian judge scored me the 9, didn't he? All right, so let's talk a little bit about how it is that you end up in the pointy end of the plane so often. What strategies are you employing to make sure that you can sit in business or first class?
We utilize a ton of credit card miles and points. I think the biggest thing for us is we believe in diversification of our points and miles. Many people will say, oh, I want to fly Southwest, so I have the Southwest Airlines credit card. I want to fly, or I want to stay in Marriott, so I have the Marriott credit cards. We focus a lot on flexible currencies like Chase Ultimate Rewards, Citi Thank You points, Amex membership rewards, because not only do those give us the ability to redeem them for cash if a great deal comes up, but we also can transfer to some 50 odd airline partners or 30 some odd hotels. So it gives us the option to be flexible with what we want to do. That's from a credit card standpoint. The other thing that we do is sign up for and try to take advantage of almost every promotion that comes out that you could possibly think of. I know that one of our biggest things was a few years back, and you might remember this since we've talked about that. We've been doing this for a while, Ed, but gosh, Delta was offering miles for Bosley hair transplant consultations a few years back. I don't know if you remember that or you ever took advantage of that or not, but I am follically challenged.
Yes, you are.
I am. And so I managed to schedule 3 in one day. So you did one at 9 a.m., one at noon, and one at 3. And since they uploaded all the information at night, it was 25,000 points, 25,000 Delta Sky Miles per consultation. So that day we got 75,000 Delta Sky Miles just to have somebody tell me how they could make me not bald. I am very proudly bald, but I will say that 75,000 Sky Miles was a fantastic return for one day of just sitting in a doctor's office, having them prod my head with pins and needles to take a look. To those kind of things that you can't miss out on. Every single promotion that comes up, you've got to take advantage of.
Yeah, I agree. And for those listening in, I've certainly hung out with John here and there, and I can verify he is very, very bald. So those consultations may not have worked for putting hair back on his head, but they definitely helped inflate his mileage account. And I absolutely agree with your premise of making sure that you hit whatever promotions you can that come up. I think it's one of those things where diversification is such a key point that keeps coming up. The way I usually frame it with people is like, hey, if you've got a retirement account, you don't have all the same stock in your retirement portfolio. You're diversified. And so with
Exactly.
airlines and hotels, we don't want to hold on to just one currency, because if something crazy happens with it, like just say, for instance, hypothetically, I understand this could never happen, but if like Marriott were to acquire SPG and then completely wreck the tech side so you couldn't make reservations for 3 weeks, you'd want
What
to have
is that?
you'd
What?
want to have some other currencies laying around.
That doesn't happen. Oh, wait, it did.
In theory.
In theory. Well, and as on that, Mark, we were just doing and I don't say this to say look at me how awesome I am, but we were just doing our math on our points. We're sitting on about 5.5 million miles in points, I think, right now between all our programs, and we just redeemed 1 million miles and points for this great trip that we're taking in a couple weeks to go to the Maldives, and it was a mix of Delta Sky Miles and Hilton Honors and SPG, and some Marriott were thrown in there, and American Airlines was in there, and Alaska was in there. So we were able to take advantage of 6 different currencies to combine for this one trip. Whereas if all you earned was American Airlines miles, you wouldn't be able to take advantage of the trip. Or you would, you'd just be paying out the year for it.
No, I agree. And I can't preach that enough. That's the takeaway that I give so many folks. If folks are just tuning in to you for the first time, give an idea of, other than obviously the premium travel focus, what are the areas that you consider yourself a good go-to resource for if they have questions?
Yeah, we're based here in Seattle, and because of that, we are very loyal to Alaska Airlines. I'd like to think that between Ben and I, we probably cover the majority of all things Alaska Airlines. Don't get me wrong, there's always something that we can learn, but as far as Alaska Airlines is concerned, we pretty much got it down. The flight routes, the ins, the outs, that is our specialty. We fly them at least 2 or 3 times a month, and so we're very familiar with all their processes and how they work. From a hotel side of things, we're very loyal to Marriott and SPG, and a lot of the inner workings of where the best deals are, where the best hotel deals are. But just in general, besides a specific airline, we always focus very heavily on where to find the promotions to get the miles and the points, what credit card to sign up for. I was in finance before this, and my job was credit cards. So I guess, everyone says, what's your superpower? Some people want to be invisible or have super strength. I think my superpower is knowing every detail about every credit card that's in the market today. It's kind of a party favor that really, it's not that exciting. No one really wants to see the magic trick of here's the latest Citibank earning potential on your credit card. But because we know so much about the ins and outs of all the credit cards, we're able to guide friends, family, and then readers as well to, hey, here's the best option for you. Here's where you should spend your credit card money in order to get the best for your trip.
Nobody really wants to know all of that information, but they sure do want to know the one specific piece they need when they're like, wait a second, you went where, for how much, and how did you do that?
And you got them to pay for how? This is how I akin it, right? Like, I have a great friend of mine who does CrossFit, and he is ripped, right? Like 2% body fat. His biceps have biceps, right? It's just, this guy is jacked, but he doesn't know the first thing about how to earn credit card miles and credit card points. And when he tries to tell me how to get in shape and how to work out, I just stare at him with this blank look, because I don't get it. I don't know all the ins and outs of working out. Just like when I tell him about how to go to a shopping portal to earn miles, he just looks back and gives me a blank stare. We're both experts at what we're experts at. But it's not that one thing is worse than the other. I just don't have the interest in learning out how to be, a mega CrossFit star. And he doesn't have the interest in learning how to use miles and points. And that's okay.
Yeah, no, I agree. And for those listening in, the workout guy with the 2% body fat is not me. I understand how that could be confused.
Oh, come on, Ed.
So real quick before we step away for our last break, is most of your travel for work or for pleasure?
Well, so I do travel for my job. I travel probably once a month, but we're talking maybe a 3-day trip or 4-day trip. So that's not too terrible. We like to get out and just travel for fun. We're heading to Florida this weekend. Next weekend, we're heading to Yellowstone. The next weekend, we're going to go to the south of France for 2 days. Then we're going to North Carolina for 2 days. And then the next weekend, we're going to be in Pittsburgh for the weekend. And the next weekend after that, we'll be in Austin for the weekend. So pretty much, if you're following a trend here, a lot of our travel is on weekends. But it is fun, right? I think the other cool part is that when you're traveling and you have a blog, that trip ends up kind of also becoming a work trip in a way. But it's mostly just, it's our passion, it's our hobby to go and spend as much time as we can.
Yeah, and it's funny because I'm going to use your South of France example. I get this question a lot from folks. Most recently, I remember when I went to Australia last year, and it was, well, why would you go to Australia for just 2 days? Well, why would you go to, what are you going to do in the South of France for just 2 days? And my answer is always the same. Well, I'm going to do 2 days worth of really awesome stuff in the South of France on those 2 days, and I'll go back and do the rest some other day. But people think that short trips aren't necessarily beneficial, but when you're reducing the cost of traveling like you guys are, great, why not go get you 2 days in the South of France and do something you've never done before, or something you did and want to go back and love?
We went to Frankfurt for dinner.
Sure.
We flew. A friend of ours was as a flight attendant with a large European airline, and he was going to be laying over in Frankfurt. And he says, "Oh, I haven't seen you guys in forever." I said, "Well, why don't we have dinner?" He's like, "You're not in Frankfurt." I said, "Well, we could be." So we flew out. We landed at like 2 p.m, got to the hotel, checked in, met with him around 5, toured around the city, had a coffee, went and had dinner, woke up the next morning, had breakfast, and flew home. That's it.
Yeah. And I know that sounds crazy to a lot of people, and that is a lot of traveling, but
not to you and I.
No, and it's certainly very achievable, even if you think it's a little bit crazy. All right, well, we're going to step aside. We're going to bring John back for one more segment, grill him on some lightning questions before we toss him out the door and get ready for next week's episode. We'll be right back on the NowBoarding podcast. The NowBoarding podcast is brought to you in part by No Jet Lag. Don't let jet lag get you down. There are flight crews, sports teams, and business executives all around the world that sing the praises of No Jet Lag. No Jet Lag is the leader in jet lag management for the last 25 years. Don't let jet lag spoil your next trip. Visit nojetlag.com to get yours today. All right, welcome back to our final segment this week on the NowBoarding podcast, hanging out with John from NoMas Coach. And just to keep it consistent, we'll give it a third time. John Nicodandrea.
You just said John. I was like, oh, he's going to just skip it. Why? No, that's good. Good.
All right, good. All right, so we got it down reasonably well. We'll definitely get it better when John comes on to Miles to Go, which we need to do. We'll refine the Dandrea.
Well, you're better than most of the flight attendants who you can see when they come up to you. Oh, and this is another thing that many people don't realize, that most times when you're in first class, they come up and they greet you, right? Oh, hello, Mr. Pizza. Hello, Mr. Smith, whatever that may be. And they look at it and say, hello. And it's like, just call me John. Just call me John. It's fine. Like, okay, Mr. John. Nope, just John. Just John.
Look, this 30 minutes is supposed to be about you, but I'll take just a brief divergence and ask you one question. How many times do you honestly think the flight attendants get my name correct?
Oh, it's I wouldn't even know what to say. I would assume no more than 50% of the time.
Not even close, because it looks just like pizza, but they try and put vowels and consonants everywhere they're just not supposed to be.
Plizza, pizzazz.
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
I'm glad you understand my struggles.
Oh,
my struggles are real.
I certainly do. Well, it's why I shorted my name to Pizza, because like, well, gosh, like if you can't pronounce that, I can't help you. My job is done here. All right, so let's hit some lightning questions before we run out of time. Coolest place you've ever visited?
South Africa. Did a safari, man. Quit my job back in 2015, and before we took my new job on in 2016, we had 4 months of doing nothing, and decided, what better time am I going to get to take a full month to go to Africa, right? And then get a new job and say, I'd like to take a month off. It just doesn't work that way, right? So let's do it before.
Yeah.
We spent 3 weeks in South Africa, and it was amazing. We did all the tours directly with the national parks to avoid all the exorbitant fees, and got up close and personal with rhinos and with giraffes and elephants and everything. Went to a sanctuary, got to pet a cheetah, and got to pet lions, and have the cheetah was licking my head, which was super creepy.
Yeah.
But arguably, I don't think we've ever spent 3 weeks on vacation just straight. So it was arguably, I think, one of the best times that I've had was traveling to South Africa.
Yeah, I had Stefan Krasowski from Rapid Travel Chai on a couple weeks ago, and on Miles to Go, actually. He was on NowBoarding as well, but we did a segment on safaris, and I'll say, like, I was in the camp of thinking, all right, I need to figure out how to lump aside 10 grand so I could take my family for a safari, and he walked me through how to do it for $100 a day, sort of like self-serving or self-service, if you will. And now I don't know when it's going to happen because, like I said, we just booked Australia, but I'm glad to hear you say the same thing of the like, hey, you did it. You didn't break the bank. You went for 3 weeks. It was
No,
incredible.
I mean there are tons of packages that you can spend $1,000 a day, but when we contact our hotel directly and said, "Hey, do you have any safaris?" I said, "Yeah, we do our safaris directly with the park." So we booked it through our hotel. So I'm sure they got a 10% cut or whatever it was, right? But a full day private tour with a tour guide from the park, like an actual park ranger, was $50.
Yeah.
And the cool thing is they talk on the radio, so they know, oh, the lion kill is over here, let's go off road. Oh, and we saw some cheetahs over here, let's go. So they know where all the good stuff is because they're talking back and forth to each other. It was our own private 12-person van, and we just drove through the safari. And it's just I would go back in a heartbeat. I need to see more of Africa.
Yeah, it's totally on my radar. It's just a question of, as you can imagine, when do I squeeze it in? So,
well, the good news is you just went to Australia, so I'm sure you could find time to also tack on Africa.
I agree. All right. So, favorite credit card?
What month is it? Honestly, I say that sort of jokingly, right? But gosh,
but not really.
Well, but not really, right? So right now we're recording this in September. Discover card is at 5% cash back for dining. And so I'm in my first year of my Discover card, so it doubles to 10%. So I'm getting 10% back on dining. As of October 1st, that's going to go away. I'm not going to use that anymore. It used to be the SPG credit card, and then SPG devalued how much you're earning on regular spend, so I don't use my SPG card anymore. And I use my Chase Inc. card a lot of times for my business purchases. The categories are 5X on at office stores, at utilities, things that I use for my business all the time. So we're constantly using our Chase business cards as well to get 5X everywhere.
Yeah, I'm definitely a hardcore Chase Inc. guy. The 5X for me, we buy a lot of Amazon gift cards for a lot of our businesses for small purchases that they have to make, which, are perfect for them to order on Amazon. So definitely a heavy hitter on Inc. I'd say, where I think you were, very generous in your description of the SPG, I think the word you used was devaluation. I'd say for a card that I carried in my wallet for, probably almost 2 decades, they just killed that card.
Of course, like it doesn't make sense for me to use it for my everyday spend. In fact, I struggle sometimes to know what to use for my everyday spend. But between cashback cards, like I said, Discover's 10% at dining, or between 5X office supplies, or just whatever that may be, sometimes it just makes sense to just find a good cashback card. Like I said earlier, we're sitting on millions of miles and points. And sometimes it's nice just to have a little extra cash back, right? I mean, how many miles and points can one person really have? I can't believe I just said that out loud. Wait a minute. No, you guys hold on a second. Maybe we should edit that out. Wait a second. No. But yeah, sometimes cash is king, man.
Yes. No, I agree. It's definitely a good balance. Okay. So favorite airline?
Domestically would have to be Alaska Airlines. I love that Alaska still gives you 1 mile for every mile that you fly. I divorced Delta and I divorced American Airlines once they went revenue based. I think it's incredibly short sighted to only give loyalty to your people who spend the most money. Whether you're filling up a plane at $100 constantly or $300, you're still filling up a plane, and you push a lot of people away from loyalty if you reward them on how much they spend. So I'm gone. I don't fly them barely at all. But because of that, because we earn so many miles with Alaska Airlines internationally, it's whoever the heck we can fly that's one of their partners. British Airways, for example. I mean, we find a lot of times some really cheap first class fares on British Airways, and they credit 625% to Alaska Airlines.
Wow,
that's obscene. There's no way you can't take a 625% crediting. For those who don't know, that means if you fly 10,000 miles round trip, you'll earn 62,500 miles for one ticket. So that can't be beat.
No, it really can't be beat. I couldn't agree more. So favorite hotel chain?
It used to be SPG and Marriott. Well, it used to be Marriott, and then we got lifetime status with Marriott. So we started 2 years ago to shift our spend to SPG, and then they merged, and so now we have lifetime status with SPG. So I don't know. I still think that the SPG properties for me are some of the more aspirational ones. You know, no one really got excited about a Hampton Inn in, Paducah, but
Not yet.
Sorry to everybody listening in Paducah, but not yet. I think I know you're a big Hyatt fan. I find that for me, Hyatt is great when I want to transfer my Chase points for a stay, but I also find that a lot of times their cash rates are just a little too high for me. So I'll use Hyatt for redemptions with Chase. But other than that, right now my loyalty is to hotels.com. Whoever can get us the best deal, and I can save money on there. If it's great, if we get loyalty, fantastic. But we already have lifetime status with a bunch of people. Who else are we going to stay with?
Yeah, I hear you. Hyatt fits for me for two reasons. It's, I'm a business traveler, and so they're rewarding for hardcore business travelers. I think if you're a hardcore business traveler, or if you can find a way to get their top tier globalist status, they can be a very rewarding hotel program.
No, it has to be top tier. I'm not going to go anywhere where I can't have top tier. Let's just get that out of the way right now.
I love it. All right, last question before we run out of here. One place that's still on your bucket list.
Well, I've always had this fascination with Japan, and I don't know why. I found it just interesting as a kid, just reading about it and seeing everything that there is. We used to live in the East Coast, so it was easier to get to Europe, or it was easier to get down to the Caribbean or South America, and it was never really easy to get to Asia. So I'd like to explore more of Asia. Specifically, I want to go to Japan. But with that said, it'll be on our list eventually, right? There's tons of it's.
Right.
It's 9 hours to Tokyo and 9 hours to London. Seattle is perfectly positioned. That is exactly the same distance between Tokyo and London. So eventually, it will get on our list. I don't know when, because we keep getting really cool deals to the south of France. So it will get there eventually.
Yeah, I agree. There's tons of places that are on my list that I'm sure I'll get to eventually. Well, John, thanks so much for hanging out with us for half an hour and get to know it a little better. Let folks know where they can find you when you're not hopping on the podcast with me.
Sure. So website, nomascoach.com. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all of that is nomascoach. So NOMAS coach.com.
Awesome. Hey, John, thanks so much for being on with us. We'll talk to you soon.
Always a pleasure. Thanks, Ed.
All right, guys, thanks so much for tuning in for another episode of the NowBoarding Cop podcast. Until we're back again next week, thanks and safe travels.